That's a great question, Zach, and I appreciate you asking that. I can speak from a commercial banking point of view on that, and I think that goes to and the same thing would hold true for a lot of other industries, is finding things that are shared by others or by organizations that are important to you, sharing them to yourself, commenting on them, being consistent, and being strategic are the two things that I would emphasize when you're doing that. Just kind of haphazardly doing stuff and not having a sense of strategy behind what you're doing, I don't feel is going to deliver any return. But if you are strategic and you are consistent and you are using it, it's going to attract opportunities, guaranteed.
What are some of the best ways to reach out to people? You mentioned reaching out to people you might not know. What are some of the best ways you recommend doing that? And what is some advice that you have to make it the least awkward?
That's a very interesting question, and I think offers a fascinating perspective. Not every person that you reach out to is going to be receptive to you, and that's perfectly fine. One of the things that I've learned, sometimes for good, sometimes not so much, is that not every person you meet or interact with is going to resonate with you on the same frequency. Some people will want to interact and be receptive where others won't. The ones that are, network with them, cultivate the relationship, cultivate the connection. If you don't already have their contact information and you have a desire to network with them, this is where a strategy becomes very key. There's one way, if you don't have a person's email address, one of the things that you can do is use a website called mailtester.com, and you can test different variations of email addresses specific to their employing organization. And you can go through a serious process of elimination and find it that way. I've done that many times, and it's very, very effective. Of course, Google searches go without saying. A lot of people's email addresses are public information, but those two specific ways would be what I would recommend.
And could you just kind of follow up on the second piece of that? What advice do you have for someone who may not be as comfortable doing that reaching out? I know there is definitely some students who are definitely okay with that, but some students who may find that very challenging.
And I've experienced that when I was going through undergrad down there, and you have to be able to, in certain ways, move past the discomfort and understand that opportunities, in this context, job opportunities, are connected to people. Computers do not make hiring or personnel decisions. Ultimately, one person, one man or one woman is what you're looking for when you are searching for a job opportunity. You're looking for the hiring manager that is specific to that job. And if you're just haphazardly throwing your information out through Monster or Indeed, those other websites, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to let you in on a frightening reality if you haven't already been let in on it. It's almost guaranteed that the hiring manager specific to that role has no clue, literally has no idea that you are expressing an interest in a role on his or her staff. This is why I am of the view that nothing in a career success context is any more important than networking. I'm of the firm belief that it trumps everything else.
So someone asked, so you said that recruiters Google us. How do you recommend student could clean up the things that appear on Google when someone searches their name?
If there is stuff out there that is negative or derogatory or stuff that you're not interested in people finding through Google searches, my firm recommendation is to find out the source of that information and literally be a bulldog about having it removed. Whoever posted it out there, if you have to spend hours, if not days, finding however it wound up out there on the internet, make that investment of time to remove it. Because like I said, we're all Googled. When I say I'm talking about people, products, and services, think about this for a minute. If you're going to make a significant investment in something, say you're going to buy a new appliance, you're going to buy a new car, a home, you're going to do Google searches. It's no different for a hiring manager or a recruiter or someone who specializes in talent acquisition. If you have a group of diversified, credible LinkedIn recommendations on your profile that the world can see versus the next three people that don't, it should be very obvious who has a decisive competitive advantage for the job that all four of those people want. So to back to your original question, I haven't experienced that, thankfully, knock on wood, but I would do everything possible to remove any derogatory information about yourself from the internet, because it could be a hindrance in being selected for interviews and ultimately having a great opportunity offered to you.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree that I think from a career counselor's perspective, that doesn't just go for things on Google. If you have pictures on your social media that you wouldn't think you'd want a hiring manager to see, those are things I would recommend personally taking down as well. Just as Dustin was talking about with LinkedIn and Google, any other social media is fair game for recruiters to look at as well, and you don't want to give them any sort of reason to not want to continue to talk to you because of something you decided to post on your social media. No
question about it. And I'm glad you mentioned other social media outlets, Zach, because Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other big name websites are great. However, all of them, at least in my view, go into the fun box. LinkedIn is business. It is focused on business networking amongst people and organizations, and serves that purpose better than any other website that I know. I've had multiple hiring managers and recruiters when I've gone to job fairs or when I've represented organizations say, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you are in many ways excluding yourself from further consideration. Here's another thing I'll just add. I read a quote from a recruiter in Dallas probably 3, if not 4 years ago. If you have a poor or dismissive or highly skeptical attitude towards the LinkedIn website, it does not matter. And the reason it does not matter is because the people that want to find you and want to know about your talent and the value that you offer to the world have an exceedingly high regard for it.
One of the other questions came in was, what tips would you give to someone who wanted to brand yourself in their summary if you don't have a lot of experience?
That's a great point, and I would emphasize what you do offer. Everyone, literally every university student or industry professional has value to offer. You take a very hard look at what you have done up to this point in your life, through the work experience that you have earned, the university education that you have completed, or are in the middle of doing, such as y'all as university students here, and speak to the value in what you learned in those experiences and brand it that way, because those are the things that you can honestly speak to.
A question to kind of expand on that. So you've talked about your headline a little bit. Can you talk about that summary section? What do you think that summary section could look like in a way that would be helpful for students?
Okay, well, if I would, not to make this about me, because it's not about me, it's about y'all as students at the university, but I'm going to pull my profile up, and I'm going to show you the way that I set mine up, and hopefully this will maybe help y'all, provide y'all with the roadmap a little bit. You can see my image back here, the background image, downtown Houston at night, my picture, all the 220 characters in the headline are used. I have this quote here, like I said, which embodies how I approach my work. I mention my name, what I do, how long I've been in the industry, and then I explain what I feel the elements of my value proposition consist of in paragraph with intentional white space to break it up so I'm not overwhelming people with the information. What I feel are my 5 strongest personal attributes. Tell people that I'm always open to networking, my work email, and my cell phone. There's that. You can see that there's activity, which there is every day, my current job, and jobs that I've had prior to, going back to when I first entered the commercial banking industry in August of 2002, my university education. One of the things that I'd like to point out is the importance, at least this is my personal view, not everyone agrees with me, of your high school. A lot of people ask me, okay, you've been out of high school for 20 years, and you furthered your education at a university. Why are you bothering to put your high school out there? It's one very specific reason. It answers where I am from. Although I live here in the Houston area, I'm not from here originally. I am a native of Galveston. I moved to Houston in 2005. By showing my high school, I am answering the question, which many of you probably wonder about the people that you meet, like where are you from, where are you a native of? This answers that question. So I just want to point that out. My volunteer experience, certifications, and honors and awards that I've had the privilege of earning. That's the way I set mine up. Again, I don't mean to make this about me because this presentation is not about me, but that's my profile, and it's just one example.
What should an introductory conversation look like when first connecting with someone on LinkedIn? So if you were going to send a message to someone as an introduction, what would you want to include in there?
Great question. And I advocate that you introduce yourself, what you do, why you're wanting to make a connection with a person, and specifically mention what you view to be the commonalities between you and the person that you're wanting to network with. People are always more likely to network with you when they can almost immediately feel that there are pre-existing commonalities, such as your university, such as an industry, such as shared industry experiences. Point at those things, and it's almost guaranteed that they're going to accept your invitation. And then from that point on, you can further develop the relationship and the connection online and or offline.
Cool. And as a follow up to that, when students do connect with someone, so a lot of times with our students, they'll meet a recruiter or they'll meet someone at an information session or a career fair, and they'll connect with them on LinkedIn and then follow up and send one initial message and then not necessarily know what to do after that. Can you talk a little bit about what your advice would be to how to cultivate those type of relationships utilizing LinkedIn?
My biggest recommendation for that is to not come off too pushy in the early going. And I know that Amanda Ware is on this call, and about 2 years ago, she taught me something that I kind of knew before, but she really drove it home for me. And I've said this several times in a couple of years since then during my presentations. When you meet someone literally the very first time or connect with someone on this website the very first time, would it be in the few moments after that that you would ask them to borrow the keys to their car? The answer is of course not, because they're not going to say yes because they don't trust you yet, because a foundation of trust has not developed between you and them. My point is to not be too pushy in the early going. Politely and consistently maintain contact with them, develop the trust relationship, and opportunities will come from that.
Cool. Just so, I know as a career counsel, I have my kind of view on that. I know Amanda would as well. But in your view, what is too pushy? What is not pushy enough? Like, what do you think? What do you think that kind of boundary should look like?
Depending on how often the person that you're emailing or calling or texting actually responds to you, if they're consistently receptive and there's an ongoing dialogue, a productive, positive dialogue between you and the other person, as I see it, once a week or once every couple of weeks is not too much. Everyone is busy with something, whether it's in their personal life and or their professional life, and no one wants to feel like they're being nagged or being pushed or even shoved about something, so to speak. So if they're being receptive to you and they are responding, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. I would say once a week, once every couple of weeks, maybe a little bit more than that is perfectly acceptable.
And something you mentioned is the person who doesn't respond. What if that person is the number one person that you want to talk to at the company that you want to be at, and you send a message and you don't hear anything back? Where do you think you kind of go from there? And what is your view on following up?
Again, a great question and a great observation. I know that comes from your experience there at Bauer as a career counselor, Zach. My best way of answering that is this. As counterintuitive as it may seem, and as painful as it can be when someone who holds the keys to an opportunity, if they're not responsive to you, ladies and gentlemen, please hear me very clearly. Not every organization or the hiring managers within that organization is going to deserve you. They're not going to deserve you or the talent that you could potentially bring to them. If they're not receptive to you, even though you've been polite, you've been consistent, you're very respectfully asking for status updates, and they're simply not responding, my recommendation is to let it go. I know that can be hard to hear because you have your heart set on something that just seems to align so perfectly with what you want to do career-wise. But if they're not responding to you, that is a very clear indicator that these are probably not people that you want to work for and or with.
Cool. Thank you for that. Switching topics a little bit, what are some of the ways that students could best interact on LinkedIn? So I know you said interacting with posts, interacting with other members. Do you promote them being active in groups? What are good ways that they could make themselves known in their fields?
For LinkedIn specifically, hashtags are very powerful, and it's very easy to find the hashtags. The most highly followed hashtags sometimes are followed by hundreds, if not millions, thousands, if not millions of people. Those are very effective. I use hashtag banking industry, Houston banking, credit risk management, networking, career management, almost on an everyday basis for stuff that I share and or comment on. Those are as highly effective. Groups are also great. I own one, if not two different groups that serve different purposes. One is for highly recommended individuals, and one is a networking group that I used to manage years ago in the Houston financial services. But I really feel that adding strategic hashtags that align with the industry and or industries that you're interested in it can and will exponentially increase your visibility to the people within that industry, specifically ones that could possibly hire you.
Cool. Thank you. Another question I got was, what is the type of person that you're looking to reach out to? Is it someone who are you specifically wanting to connect with recruiters? Or is it something where you want to reach out to kind of entry-level people that are doing what you want to do? Or do you want to reach out to higher-level people that are doing what you want to do? How do you be strategic in who you're connecting with?
These are some great questions. Do everything you can through research to identify, if you don't know who the hiring manager is, whomever he or she happens to be within the walls of that organization, do everything possible to identify who that is. If you don't know, you can use kind of some dot connecting intuitive stuff to find out who it would most likely be based on their job title. Say, for instance, you wanted to be in my industry, commercial banking, like say a credit underwriter at Texas Gulf Bank. It's a relatively small commercial bank here in the greater Houston area. You can rest with the absolute guarantee that the senior credit officer of that organization either is the hiring manager or the hiring manager reports to him or her, meaning that senior credit officer is going to have an enormous amount of influence on whether or not an interview is granted and certainly whether an offer is ultimately extended. It's using just I don't want to say this in a way that could put anybody off, but it's using some dot connecting, using a little bit of common sense, using some intuition to find who within the organization either makes the personnel decision or has significant influence on it. Folks, HR, as important and as most of the time as wonderful as they are, don't make the personnel decision. They're involved, but they are not the ones who decide who ultimately land those jobs. It's the hiring manager, and I do everything you can to locate whoever he or she is and make a compelling case for yourself to him or her.
So should students cut down their connections at any point? Say there's people they haven't talked to in a while. Is it kind of like Facebook where you just purge your old friends that you haven't talked to since high school?
I do not advocate for at any point, unless they're just people are being rude or belligerent or they're trying to soil you or your reputation. At no point do I advocate for shrinking your network or somehow making it smaller. Again, it goes back to one of the key points that underpin my presentation. Opportunities, jobs, volunteer roles ultimately connect to people. And the bigger your network is, the more strategically built and cultivated that it is, you exponentially increase the likelihood that you would be considered for the ones that you're interested in. So I don't advocate for doing that at all unless there's a really good reason for it.
So endorsements or recommendations, are they important? And if so, which one's better and what should you be looking for?
Man, y'all are just killing it with these great questions. Endorsements are specific to the skills that you list on your profile. I believe the maximum is 50. I personally don't think that an individual can legitimately lay claim to 45 or 50 different skills. I think I have 10 or 12 listed on my profile, all of which are pretty significantly endorsed. Ladies and gentlemen, recommendations are where it's at. When you have a group of recommendations from a diverse group, from a diverse collection of credible individuals on your profile, it literally can shift the discussion from, yes, you're being considered for a role, to when do you want to start. They are the only element of a LinkedIn profile we ourselves don't write. They are exclusively written by other individuals who take the time and the thoughtful consideration to write something meaningful about you and something and what you are, how you've delivered, how you've worked, or anything like that. I personally, again, I'm not trying to make this about me because it's not. Since November of 2008, which is when I originally opened my profile, I've had the privilege of earning 56 recommendations. One of the two groups that I own and manage on the LinkedIn website is called Top Recommended People. I have that set as a group that's specific to people who have 10 or more visible recommendations on their profile. I have 2,360 something people in that group from every continent on the face of this planet except the frozen one. Recommendations are where it's at. Students can recommend you, people you've worked with, people you've worked for, customers, people that you've associated with through volunteer organizations. The more diverse and the more credible they are, it's going to hugely elevate your profile.
So a question that I just got asked is, what is your thoughts on connecting with people you don't know? More in the sense of connecting with people that aren't connected to anyone that you don't know. What's your advice on making that initial making that initial contact? So how would you think the best way to go about that would be?
That's a very interesting perspective, and I have encountered this on a variety of different occasions over the past almost 12 years. And if there's no existing commonalities between you and another person that you want to network with, one of the ways that I've found to be very, very effective is to state that. When you send that invitation to network with them, say who you are, maybe give a little bit of blurb about where you're from, what you do. State the fact that, sir, ma'am, I fully acknowledge the fact that there's no, at least apparent commonalities or common ground between you and I. However, I feel that networking with you and you networking with me could provide value in both directions, and I welcome that opportunity. I've done that hundreds of times over the years, and I don't know that I've ever been turned down.
So I just had a question come in as a follow-up to the recommendations piece.
Mm-hmm.
How would you get recommendations? They said, for example, if we wanted a recommendation from a supervisor from a past internship, what would be a good way to ask them for that?
First of all, you need to establish, the website requires that you have a first-tier connection with that individual, whomever he or she is. So once that first-tier connection has been established, you can then go into I'll show you, let me reshare my screen how this works. Once you've established that first-tier connection with the person, you go down here towards the bottom. This is where the skills and recommendations show up. and you go right here to where it says ask for a recommendation. And once you do that and you go into here, you'll select the person that you want to be recommended by, and then you send it to them. Then they write it. They can send it to you. It gives you the opportunity to ask for any adjustments that you want or that you think they may be willing to make. And there it is.
So a student just asked, amid the pandemic that we're in right now with social distancing being a thing, what's the best way to ask for a networking relationship to move beyond LinkedIn, since it's not responsible right now to go out and get a cup of coffee or get lunch or something like that? How could you do that and not come across as pushy?
I know that, well, with what's going on, that's a challenge. If it were me and I were in that situation and I really had it in my heart to meet that person, to meet that individual in person and really cultivate a person-to-person connection, simply ask them. I mean, if everyone right now is wearing a mask, some are wearing gloves, some people even put the clear face mask over the mouth cover. Ask them if they'd be willing to meet somewhere to have a cup of coffee or to go grab lunch. I mean, it's not as easy as it used to be considering what's going on, and it's a little bit more awkward because we have, these things over our faces and over our eyes. Some people are wearing gloves that are real conservative, but I would ask. At the end of the day, if you're trying to find a job, that means you're trying to provide for yourself and you're trying to provide for your loved ones. This kind of reminds me of a quote, and in a way, I think there's a parallel. Do you remember that time someone else's opinion paid your bills? Me neither. So the point of me saying that is ask them if they'd be interested in doing so. And if they say no and you move on.
Yeah, and I also think something that we always talk about, especially if you're networking with someone, I almost can think of this also like if you're networking with someone who isn't in the same city, you're almost in that same situation anyway. So utilize the technology that you have. See if someone's willing to jump on a Zoom call with you, like we're on, or get on the phone call. I think it's not necessarily the same person-to-person contact, but it's a way that's a little bit more formal than sending an email back and forth with each other.
Agreed.
That's another way that might be able to do that.
Very much agree with that.
So we have a couple more questions. We're a couple minutes over, but I want to get through the questions I got through from students.
Okay.
So a student said, so they have low to no work experience, but a really good GPA. How could they use LinkedIn to find a job or an internship opportunity, and how would they highlight their success in academics?
That's a very interesting perspective. And I think if I were in that situation where I were a bit light in actual work or industry experience, but have an exceedingly high GPA and I'm a very high performer academically, I would make it clear through the summary and in the education section of my profile that, hey, I acknowledge the fact that I'm at a point professionally where I have not acquired a significant level of experience. However, I am an exceedingly high performer in terms of my academic coursework, which is exemplified by fill in the blank GPA, and emphasize that different people market themselves in different ways. And if that were my situation, that's the way I would approach it.
Cool, thank you. So the last question we got in from students is LinkedIn Premium for students, is that worth the money?
Great question, and I do not believe it is necessary for anyone, regardless if you are a university student or an experienced industry professional. I use the non-paid, non-premium version of the website, and it works like an absolute champ. I've never paid a single nickel for it in almost 12 years of using the website, and I have no intention of doing so. I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you for that. The last question I've been asking at the end of all of these sessions, and I would love for you to answer as well, is do you mind sharing just one piece of advice that you'd give to students that are going into recruiting right now for either jobs or internships, given the situation that we're in? What's one piece of advice that you'd like to share?
Your digital footprint. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you listen to me. Your digital footprint the particular relationship between LinkedIn and Google, the importance of that cannot be quantified. It was the situation before this whole virus thing hit. It absolutely is the situation now. I don't see that changing. If you choose not to have a LinkedIn profile and or to invest significant time in developing and cultivating your profile and presence, you are intentionally, with knowledge from yours truly, putting yourself at a severe disadvantage, comparatively speaking, relative to the overwhelming majority of the other people that you are competing with who have elected to do that.
Cool. Thank you so much. We had a great session today. Please we really thank Dustin. I thought it was a great presentation and he gave really awesome advice.
Thank y'all for having me. It was a privilege to be here, and it really meant a lot to me to have this opportunity. So thank y'all very much.